50 years ago, Playboy magazine came onto the scene and changed the way Americans thought about and talked about sexuality. But Playboy's influence also reached outside the bedroom. The lifestyle magazine was complete with fashion, book reviews, compelling interviews, and fiction by the country's most prominent writers. Here's a look at how it all began.
1953 was a year of political conservatism and sexual repression.
Jack, please don't do that.
But a 27-year-old named Hugh Hefner was about to launch a men's magazine that would literally change the world. Working out of his own apartment, the Chicago family man poured everything he had into Playboy's first issue. And when it hit the newsstands in November, it was anyone's guess if there would be another. The magazine offered humor, fiction, and articles on everything from food and drink to sports and jazz. But Playboy differed from other men's magazines in a daring move. The young publisher purchased the rights to the most talked about but rarely seen photograph of the year, a nude calendar pose taken of a young but equally daring actress named Marilyn Monroe.
Playboy has grown into a global multimedia brand due largely to the keen business sense of the company's chairman and CEO, Christy Hefner. I am pleased to welcome her and her father, Playboy's founder and editor-in-chief, Hugh Hefner, to this table. Well,
Thank
great
you.
to see
Thank
you.
you.
It's great to be here.
Tell me what you hope this magazine is and became.
Well, when I started it, I didn't put a date on that first issue because I wasn't sure there was going to be a second issue.
I know.
And what I really wanted to simply do, I wanted to edit a lifestyle magazine for young single guys. And a lot of guys were out there waiting for it, obviously. And 50 years later, here we are.
Yeah. But did it become more than that? Or has it always simply been a magazine about lifestyle?
It was a lifestyle magazine from the beginning. If you look at the very first issues, as crude as they were, it was all there. I mean, there were food and drink features in it, and fashion and jazz and automotive, in addition to the girls, and good fiction and good... even when I couldn't afford the good writers, I was using public domain material, etc.
Yeah. But you wanted to do that from the beginning.
Yes.
Find good writers.
Yes.
Find stuff that
Absolutely.
you would mix with the pictures and make a combination.
That was the notion, to to put the good literature in combination with the romantic connection.
And the good interviews, get them in there too. Yeah. When I first met you in Chicago in the late 70s,
Right. Shortly after I joined Playboy.
Exactly right.
Right.
I mean, why did you join Playboy? Why did you decide that this is a place for you?
Well, I didn't join thinking I was going to stay. I had graduated Brandeis. I wanted to be in a profession where I could make a difference. I loved law. I loved journalism. I worked as a journalist and thought I'd go to law school. And my dad really was the one who made me the offer and said, why don't you learn something about the family business before you do whatever you're going to do in your life? And I moved back to Chicago expecting to work for a couple of years and do just that, work in different jobs and then go to law school. And I think part of what made it successful for me was that I didn't have the expectation or the burden of being the heir apparent. I just came into the company and started to work.
And fell in love with it?
I fell in love with the variety of what the company is and the politics of Playboy and the people who it attracts.
Politics meaning what?
A company that didn't judge people by their gender or the color of their skin or their sexual orientation or where they were born, but what they could do. A company that really had strong roots in sort of individual freedoms, not just in its pages, but in its employment practices. A company that was prepared to be politically active and take the risk of being for gun control when maybe a lot of its readers were actually not in favor of gun control. And a company that really cared about the quality of what it was doing.
You always wanted her to run this thing?
I don't think that was the notion at all to begin with. No, I just, she'd been out of Brandeis for a year or so and wasn't quite sure, what she was going to do. And I thought it would be nice for her to come in and see what the old man was up to. And it was a way of reconnecting because I was not there when the children were growing up. And
because you were building the magazine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you thought this was a way I can, what?
Make the connection. Yeah. It was something very much from the heart.
And when did you know it might be a lifetime for her?
I don't know. I think she would have to. I have no idea. There was a moment
it clicked in?
Yeah. Well, I think when we ran into the changing political climate in the 1980s, when things got much more conservative, it was a more difficult time for Playboy, and we took some very serious bumps. And she came to me, and I was already unhappy with management in Chicago, and.
You were living in L.A. by then?
Yes, right, yeah. I had turned the real day-to-day running of the company over to other people.
And you were not happy?
I was not happy.
I do remember this. I remember before that happened, somewhere around the end of the 70s, maybe 1980, so I'd been in the company maybe 5 years. I remember reading an article or an interview with my dad, and the reporter said, well, something along the lines of, is Christy going to run the company or something someday? And he said, oh, I expect someday. And we'd actually never talked about it. And I thought, well, that's interesting that he thinks that.
Well, implicit in the notion of come on in and find out what the old man's up to, it's more than just a tour of duty. Yeah. I mean, behind it is the notion of the other possibilities of another generation. Yeah. And of course, at the moment when the thought really finally occurred to her and then to me, it really was, how inspired, how perfect. For a publication and a company that's thought of as the last bastion of chauvinism, to have a woman.
It had a certain nice feeling,
Absolutely.
a ring to it there, the fact that, and not only that, a woman whose reputation was being very bright and smart, and people, all of us knew who she was and knew because of her skills and talents. When Penthouse came along, and when Larry Flint's magazine, Hustler, came along, did you say to yourself, my God, I'm in for trouble because where the cutting edge has gone beyond where I am?
No, I never really felt that, quite frankly, because you have to remember that even in the 1950s, Playboy was the most imitated magazine out there.
Right.
So it was really only in the late 60s, early 70s when both Penthouse and then after Hustler began to get a larger circulation that I did see that there was going to be some competition in terms of newsstand sales. But I never really thought of them as similar magazines because I never really thought of Playboy as a sex magazine. I thought of it as a lifestyle magazine that encompassed a whole variety of interests and focused first and foremost on the romantic connection between the sexes. And that was not what Penthouse and Hustler were doing.
They were doing what?
Well, I think it was, I think that both magazines were essentially explicit sex magazines. I think that is why, quite frankly, Playboy has survived and Penthouse has gone belly up.
There was a time also you began to lose circulation from 7 million plus to down to 3 or 4, which I guess is, and then it leveled off. What happened and how did you stop it?
Well, I think the world of media has changed dramatically, and you can see it in what number of viewers are tuned in at any one time to a network show as compared to 30 years ago. You've got more channels, you've got more magazines, you've got the internet, you've got video games. Right. So I think all of us in the media business aspire to, maintain our relative position, and the fact that this is the 5th decade that Playboy will be the best-selling magazine for men in the U.S. and the world is what we focus on. And at the same time,
50 years.
At the point in the past when the magazine was selling a lot of copies also, it didn't have its international editions. So part of what makes it a global brand is that now it's the most popular magazine for men in Poland, in Brazil, in, Mexico, in all these countries around the world where the Playboy lifestyle resonates as well.
And the brand, as a matter of fact, is one of the most popular in clothing, men's clothing and women's clothing, in communist China, where the magazine is not yet permitted.
Yeah.
The Playboy the brand.
Hugely.
Now, do you license that yourself? I mean,
Yes.
you license the Playboy, and they respect the license, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
Well, I think it's part of the fact that they are fascinated in other parts of the world with, what's going on here.
What difference did she make in your judgment, in terms of hard decisions, change that she brought to the continued evolution and success of Playboy?
Well, I think the fact that she was there and somebody that I could trust. I mean, you know, it's not only the obvious talent, you know, the brightness and the, you know, the judgment, but also somebody, you know, that was kin that I, you know, who thought in the same terms that I thought.
Yeah. What does that mean?
Well, I think that at the end of most days, I think we would come to the same conclusion in terms of making a lot of these decisions.
In other words, where the decision she would recommend would be the decision that you think you would have reached on your own.
Yes, one of the things that's interesting, because, you know, she grew up during a period that's referred to as the generation gap, that supposedly there were major differences between parent and child. The reality is that our values are remarkably the same and have been from the very beginning. And she, of course, is a feminist. So, you know,
and you?
What that says then is confusing in terms of, well, I'm a humanist. In other words, I see this, you know, as very much the same kind of thing. In other words, my values are feminist values.
There's nothing about him and his lifestyle in which you say, oh, well,
what is he up to?
no, exactly. What is he up to? And I just look, I love him, he's my dad, and we're in business together, and I'm proud that he's my dad, but she says, I wish he wouldn't do that. I wish he wouldn't do that.
You know why that isn't true? To your question, why do I not feel that way? I think there are two reasons. One, because like everybody, you want the people you love to be happy.
Exactly, I know.
And that's more important than anything. And certainly, as long as their happiness doesn't come at someone else's expense. And one of the things I think is really quite stunning about my father, and something that Brian Grazer, who's working with him on a film, talks to me about all the time, is that where most men can't keep a civil relationship with one woman, he seems to have kept a civil relationship with hundreds of women.
Past and present. In other words,
In other words, the former girlfriends are friends.
Close friends.
Absolutely.
Close friends.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
And
is
that
that
is
to
something
a person almost? I mean, I don't
it's
know.
something I take a great deal of, no, I just mean, we remain in contact
So
and
do
friends.
I. Actually, that's the way I view it, too.
Yeah, because otherwise I think you are in conflict with something about yourself.
You have taken great pride in celebration of pleasure.
Yes, well, I don't see a lot to be said for the celebration of pain.
No, I don't either. But you know
Well,
what
I
mean.
think that
But there are in
there
some
are whole
quarters.
organizations and religions that are based on the
Celebration of
opposite.
pain. Well, I
yes.
know, but we're not. But I mean,
but we are.
The idea, we are what? I mean, we are.
I think that is what this is all about, a kind of conflict between two perceptions of what life is really all about. You know, is it really to be lived, or is it something an ordeal to get through for some kind of payback that's going to come later on? And I think that we're here and now.
We live a certain life of sacrifice and in order to have a better life in the next world.
Yes.
And you're saying, have the better life today.
Today.
If you can.
That's correct.
You know.
And I don't mean
And
just
you
for
can in your
yourself,
own
and I
way.
don't just mean selfishly. I mean for yourself and those around you, and for the world at
Yes,
large.
that's what I was just going to say, because I think what shouldn't get lost here either in terms of, I think, how my father has lived his life, and part of why he is as admired as he is, which is different than being envied, as well as how Playboy has lived his life, is it isn't about if it feels good, do it. It's about getting great pleasure out of life in all of its richness, and about giving back and making a difference. And he is an extraordinarily ethical man who has put his money where his mouth is on many issues and for many causes. And this company, which is not a huge company, has made a significant difference on important issues. So I think that's an equally important part of what is the common values that he was talking about.
What issues do you think it's made a difference on? I mean, I assume censorship would be an issue.
Censorship would be an issue. But perhaps less assumed abortion rights.
Right.
I mean, Playboy published clinics where women could get safe abortions before it was legal. Playboy funded litigation that became rolled up as a part of Roe v. Wade. Playboy put the foundation grant in place for the Women's Rights Project
Is
of
that
the
because
ACLU.
of your impact,
No,
or is that
this is all
because of-
before I joined the company.
She was still in school.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg
Millions of
ran
dollars,
the
isn't it?
Women's Rights Project of the ACLU off of funding from Playboy. And when she got named to the Supreme Court, I wrote her a note, and we'd not met personally, and just said how thrilled I was she was on the court, and perhaps she remembered. She wrote me the most lovely note back about what it had meant to get Playboy's funding to start the Women's Rights Project of the ACLU.
And we're talking back in the 60s and early 70s. I mean, we were the amicus curiae on Roe versus Wade.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Gay rights?
Your lawyers went in and argued.
You betcha.
As a friend of the court and argued on the
funded a
side
number
of
of the lower court decisions that led to Roe versus Wade.
And gay rights, which, think about it, here's the epitome of a heterosexual, men's magazine, taking positions as early as the 60s very strongly against discrimination on the basis of sexuality, and lived by those decisions. Maybe the only publication in the early days of AIDS that published safe, sane information about AIDS. So a lot of important human rights issues.
The other half, actually, what I was all about. In other words, to begin with, when I started the magazine, it was an entertainment magazine throughout the 50s. But in the early 60s, we introduced the Playboy Interview.
Right.
I started writing the Playboy Philosophy, formed the Playboy Foundation to put our money where our mouth was, and started trying to change things in terms of race and sex and the Vietnam War and gun control and a whole number of things that mattered.
Take a look at this. Let's go way back to 1956. One of my colleagues at 60 Minutes, Mike Wallace, interviewing Hef for a program he did called Night Beach, which was interesting. It had a black background and a one-on-one interview. Here it is.
Good evening, I'm Mike Wallace. The show is Night Beat. Our first story, he's Hugh Hefner, and we'll try to find out why he really did start Playboy and whether or not it's just a smutty story. Chicago Magazine quoted you to the effect that sex will always be a primary ingredient of the magazine. Isn't that really what you're selling, kind of a high-class, dirty book?
No, I don't think so at all. There's an important distinction here. Sex always will be an important part of the book, because sex is probably the single thing that men are most interested in.
Oh, with this, I think that you'll agree. It's a sniggering kind of sex. It's a lascivious kind of sex. It certainly isn't a healthy approach to sex. You would suggest that it is.
I would not only suggest it, I would say rather strongly. We consider it pretty healthy.
That was the first television interview you ever did,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
And then you went on to do your own show, and you went on to do 1,000 interviews now.
Yes.
Today, the challenge for Playboy is what? We now live in an area, we now live in an internet age in which everybody is now talking about the Paris Hilton, video, and can they download it? We're talking about cable television, of which you're involved in. What's the market today, and how does Playboy compete in that market?
I think one of the things that's interesting is that the audience of Playboy consumers is actually larger today than it's ever been in the company's history. More people combined read the magazine, go to Playboy.com every month, watch Playboy television, buy Playboy products. And I think we've been able to do that because of the combined power of the brand with those new technologies, that now we can take the world of Playboy and not just deliver it as a print magazine to 15 million readers around the world, but we can deliver television programming, DVDs, online experiences. And I think we're successful in creating content under the brand in those new technologies, and through that we've reached now women. Most of the watchers of Playboy TV are couples. Most of the buyers of Playboy products are women. And so it's a bigger audience because there are more ways to reach people and bring them into the world of Playboy.
Were you selling fantasy?
Yes, but dreams, fantasy that might become reality. So it became a motivational consideration in terms of lifestyle and in every sense.
They say beauty products are selling hope is what they're selling.
Yes, dreams.
Yeah.
Dreams. The fact that life is more than a veil of tears, and the way you look at it is very subjective, and you can feel one way about yourself, and depending on your point of view, and another way if you take a different view, and I think it. See, as a very young guy, I was fascinated with the hurt and hypocrisy that I saw in the world around me, and trying to make some sense out of that for myself, and trying to understand why I wasn't getting hugged at home, and just seeing the hurtful side of all of that, and looking for a kind of a different way for myself personally, and then through the pages of the magazine for other guys as well.
I've got some magazines here, but I don't know why I have
Good
these here.
ones.
These are all. This is all the same, isn't it? I was thinking, I'm so enamored of this Nicholson interview, which I've heard earlier, which is fantastic. Which says that interesting people still want to come to Playboy to be interviewed. I assume
People
I
really
just sell
do
Jack
read
on
the
this
articles.
idea. Where do you want to take this magazine now? Or the company is a better question.
But I do think that, you know, I share this view deeply with my father that as much as a business, we make a lot more money in television than we do in print because it's a more lucrative business.
And that is in terms of the cable channels?
Yeah, the margins in television and the cable.
That's where the biggest revenue comes from today?
Yes.
Cable channels.
And our fastest growing business is online because it's a small business growing very fast. But at the heart and soul of the company is the magazine. And it's critically important for the company that the magazine stay connected and reach each new generation of readers, and when they pick it up, they should feel as excited about it as when guys were picking it up in the 50s. And that's what I think is exciting about the magazine today, is that Jack Nicholson and Norman Mailer are in the magazine, and so is the woman who wrote The Devil Wears Prada, and so are, you know, the next generation of Norman Mailers, and that's what keeps it fresh.
Which reminds me, I remember it always was, the conventional wisdom was that Playboy paid more to good writers than anybody else. You know, it offered not only for them and more words, but it also paid them more.
Yes.
You were willing to pay top dollar to get the best. Yeah.
True.
Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
Great to have you here.
Thank you.
Again, good to see you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Playboy at 50. See you next time.